Περιμένουμε. Almost there. Okay. Είμαστε live. Μας βλέπει ο κόσμος στο YouTube και αυτοί που έχουν το link μας βλέπουν και στο LinkedIn. Καλησπέρα φίλες και φίλοι. Είμαι ο Νίκος Παπαδόπουλος. Σας καλωσορίζω στην απόψινή ανοιχτή διαδικτυακή εκδήλωση της Αμερικανικής Λεγεώνας. Έχουμε έναν εξαιρετικό ομιλητή, επισκέπτη από τις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες, τον Ηλία τον Κάτσο, τον Λου Κάτσος, και έχουμε και ομάδα άλλων από την Ελλάδα και θα σας παρουσιάσω. Το απόψινό θέμα είναι στα αγγλικά, θα το πω, Anniversary of Hellenic and American Independence and the deep historical links between the two nations. Δηλαδή η επέτειος της ελληνικής και αμερικανικής ανεξαρτησίας και οι βαθιές ιστορικές διασυνδέσεις μεταξύ των δύο χωρών. Και όπως κάνω συνήθως θα παρουσιάσω τον ομιλητή, τον κύριο ομιλητή, θα πω λίγα λόγια το βιογραφικό του και κατόπιν εγώ είμαι ο συντονιστής απόψε, θα ζητήσω από τον κύριο Κάτσο να κάνει την παρουσία του, την πρώτη του ομιλία, όσο καιρό θέλει να μιλήσει, και έπειτα θα ανοιχτεί το θέμα στους πάνελις και θα παρουσιάσω τον κάθε πάνελις και θα σας ζητήσω να πείτε λίγα λόγια για τον εαυτό σας. Ποιος είστε, για να σας ξέρει ο κόσμος, να σας ξέρει και ο κύριος Κάτσος. Λοιπόν, έχω ένα σημείωμα για τον κύριο Κάτσο. Ο Λου Κάτσος, Ηλίας Κάτσος, είναι διακεκριμένος ελληνοαμερικανός επιχειρηματίας, μηχανικός και παράγοντας της Ομογένειας στη Νέα Υόρκη. Γεννήθηκε, τέλος πάντων, στο Γεωργίτσι Λακωνίας. Το 1956 μετανάστευσε με την οικογένειά του στη Νέα Υόρκη σε μικρή ηλικία. Μεγάλωσε στο Μπρούκλιν δουλεύοντας από παιδί με τον πατέρα του. Σπούδασε πολιτικός μηχανικός στο New York University. Αργότερα απέκτησε και μεταπτυχιακό MBA Finance από το ίδιο πανεπιστήμιο. Έχει πάνω από 40 με 50 χρόνια εμπειρίας στον κατασκευαστικό και αναπτυξιακό κλάδο της Νέας Υόρκης. Κατήχε υψηλές θέσεις σε μεγάλες εταιρείες, παράδειγμα Tishman ICOM. Από το 1992 είναι πρόεδρος της εταιρείας Jackmar Associates, η οποία ασχολείται Construction and Development Consulting. Έχει συμμετάσχει στην κατασκευή εκατομμυρίων τετραγωνικών μέτρων σε ουρανοξύστες και μεγάλα έργα στο Μανχάταν. Δίδαξε για περίπου 30 χρόνια ως καθηγητής στο New York University και στο Cooper Union. Είναι ιδρυτής και πρόεδρος της EMCA, East Mediterranean Business and Cultural Alliance. Σημαντικός τέλεχος οργανισμών όπως η ΑΧΕΠΑ, το American Hellenic Institute. Είναι πρόεδρος, το πιο σημαντικό για μας, είναι πρόεδρος της Επιτροπής για την παρέλαση της 25ης Μαρτίου 2026 στη Νέα Υόρκη. Έχει οργανώσει δεκάδες εκδηλώσεις για τον ελληνισμό, την ιστορία και τον πολιτισμό. Έβαλε ενεργά στην ανοικοδόμηση του Αγίου Νικολάου στο World Trade Center. Τιμήθηκε ως Hero of Saint Nicholas για την προσφορά του. Είναι παντρεμένος και έχει 2 παιδιά με σημαντική επιστημονική καριέρα. Δίνει ιδιαίτερη έμφαση στην εκπαίδευση και στην οικογένεια. Ο Λου Κάτσος θεωρείται μια χαρακτηριστική περίπτωση ελληνικού success story στη Νέα Υόρκη. Από μετανάστης παιδί σε φτωχή γειτονιά εξελίχθηκε σε κορυφαίο τέλεχος κατασκευών, ακαδημαϊκό και ηγετική μορφή της ελληνικής ομογένειας. Όπως είπα προηγουμένως, πριν έρθετε όλοι σας, είχα μεγάλη δυσκολία να γράψω κάτι για τον κύριο Κάτσο, γιατί έχει κάνει τόσα πολλά πράγματα και έχω αφήσει πολλά έξω. Είναι πολύ ενεργό μέλος της άλλης οργανώσης στη Νέα Υόρκη, αλλά εμείς τον έχουμε απόψε να μας μιλήσει για την παρέλαση που θα γίνει στις 26 Απριλίου στη Νέα Υόρκη. Now, the Greek Independence Day Parade, New York City. The Greek Independence Day Parade takes place annually in Manhattan borough of New York City. The parade is held in annual April in honor to the anniversary of Greek Declaration of Independence from the Ottoman Empire on March 25, 1821, and the Greek War of Independence. In 1938, there was held the first Greek Independence Day parade in New York, and it's sponsored, as it is the case this year, by the Federation of Hellenic Societies of New York. Θα ήθελα τώρα να δώσω το λόγο στον κύριο Κάτσο, να τον καλωσορίσω και να κάνει την παρουσίασή του και θα συνεχίσουμε μετά. Lou.
Thank you, Nico, for hosting today and for having me speak about this very important issue. I have nothing written down, so I'm going to just say what I want to say, and then we'll have a question back and forth because I think it's important. Okay. This year, and I should mention about the parade just a couple of things. This is the largest event in the diaspora period around the world. In other words, this is the largest parade outside of Hellas, in the world, outside of Hellas. And it's the largest event that takes place in the United States of America. So people should understand that. This year is a special year. This is a special year because not only do we have the 205th anniversary of the Hellenic Revolution, but we also have the 250th anniversary of the American Declaration of Independence. And that highlights, and I'll describe it in a second, the deep historical and philosophical connection and linkage between the two nations. And that's why we themed this particular parade 205, 250. And that's why in our logo we have both the American flag and the Hellenic flag. Plus we have Athena and Lady Liberty in our logo this particular year. So it's a 205, 250 year. This year is also obviously the 250th anniversary of the birth of Yannis Kapodistrias, who was the first head of state of independent Hellas. Plus, very importantly, it's the 200th anniversary of the fall of Messaloniki in 1826, a pivotal and heroic episode in the Hellenic War of Independence. Plus, for us in America, and also for Hellas, but nobody talks about it, it's the 150th anniversary of the passing of Samuel Gridley Howe, who was known as the Lafayette of the Greek Revolution. So understanding these things and the importance of this particular year, I wanted to emphasize in the parade and in the lectures that we've had, both educational and cultural and social, the importance of the Hellenic Revolution, because many people don't understand it, nor do they understand its importance in the United States of America. When the revolution, because many people think of, they're having a parade, it's a little country in Europe, no big deal, it's a Greek parade. No, it's not a Greek parade. It's the way I envision this particular parade is it's in real importance historically. When the revolution took place, no nation in Europe wanted a revolution to take place in Europe because it was the post-Napoleonic period when no one wanted a revolution. In fact, the nations of Europe were aligned with the Ottomans, not with the revolutionaries in Greece in the beginning. What happened, of course, when the revolution broke out within Europe, within the intellectual circles, within the universities where you had classics professors, etc., they were the ones that were supporting the revolution. And in America in particular, when it reached America, it was a part of American history that was called the Greek fever period or the Greek fire period of the United States of America in the 1820s. In other words, it was a very important historical event within the U.S. So you had hundreds and in fact thousands of people who were involved in supporting the revolution, whether it was through, let's say, banquets that were raising money, whether it was sending supplies to the Hellenic, to Hellas during the revolution, whether it was ladies sending clothes to Hellas to support those who perhaps had issues, and sending food supplies So in the United States, not only did they do that in this Greek fever period, which is an important part of American history, which Americans really don't know about, but you want to explain it to them. And certainly people in Hellas don't know this. But Americans also left to fight in Greece. For example, you had the first American who was from New York, George Jarvis, who came and fought in Hellas. He went what we call native. In other words, he wore the fustanella. He started to speak the Hellenic language. He was with various. He was with Karaskakis, for example, and fought with Karaskakis. He also was with Lord Byron later, and he died in Hellas and is buried right now in Argos, as you know, Nick, because we went and did a trisagion for him at the Ayos Iwanis in Argos. Also, we had other Americans who came in here. We had a relative of George Washington who went to Greece and fought in Greece and is buried. Okay, he's buried in Nafplio. We also had Miller, Jonathan Miller, who was quite frankly a warrior and did quite well there. We had an African American slave, okay, by the name of James Williams, who came and fought in Hellas. So there were different people who actually fought there. It's part of American history and it's part of a Greek history. But at the same time, these same people who were against slavery. They didn't want slavery, let's say, that you had in the Ottoman Empire where the Greeks were slaves, etc. When they came back to the United States, they also were major abolitionists in the United States of America. So not only did we have the Greek, what we call the Greek fever period in American history, and it was important not only to men, but also to women, because it was the first time that women were engaged in international pursuits. The same thing with men. It was the first time that philanthropic things took place in the United States of America. So when they came back, being abolitionists against slavery, they also were part of the anti-slavery movement in the United States of America. So the Hellenic Revolution affected the American abolitionist movement in the United States of America. Both abolitionists who were white and abolitionists who were black at that particular period used the same exact rhetoric that was used for the Hellenic Revolution to support the abolitionist movement. Not only that, but the women who were involved in the abolitionist movement, but also the Greek fever period, they also became very instrumental in the American women's suffrage movement. So the women's suffrage movement in the United States of America was actually linked to the Hellenic Revolution through the Greek fever period, through ladies who were actually sending things out, and all of a sudden they started to feel that they have to be engaged in social issues, abolition and women's suffrage. So also many people don't realize this, but people came to the United States, orphans. Some of them became fighters for the American cause in the American Civil War. One of them was actually a captain in a ship, etc. You had another person who came in, John Zachos. Okay, John Zachos, who was a major intellectual, was in the American Civil War. Also a physician. Later on, he created books, etc., for freed slaves to teach them how to read. So and not only that, again, some of the orphans that came in later on were merchants who came into the United States in the 1850s, late 1840s, early 1850s, became part of what we call the cotton trade in the United States. And during the Civil War, because they basically started to control the cotton trade internationally. And during the Civil War, when people thought that England, for example, might join the southern side because they needed southern cotton for their mills, actually the Greek merchants found alternate sources in Egypt and in India to supply those particular mills, and the English remained neutral in the American Civil War. I can go on, but let me and also there was something else, something important. During the 1840s, after the Greek Revolution, there was the most famous statue. The most famous statue in the United States of America during that particular time was a statue called the Greek Slave. Okay, it depicted a Greek woman who was in the Ottoman slave market being sold. That particular statue had a tremendous effect in the abolitionist movement that I discussed a second ago. Plus, it had a very distinct effect also on the women's suffrage movement because, to a certain degree, they had no rights during the revolution. Uh, Besides clothes and all the rest of that things that I talked about, American women did in fact write letters, and there was exchange correspondence with women in Greece that was taking place. And also, one of the major women in the women's movement, suffrage movement, also established the first women's teachers school in Athens. Okay, in right after the revolutionary period. So there's a tremendous linkage between the two nations, and I can go on with a lot of that, but I'm just going to jump to the parade for a second. So I wanted to make that the theme of this particular year because it's very important. And as you know, Nico, one of the first events that happened was actually last year when I had an event at the Demos Center in Athens, and we shared that perspective. I discussed that perspective. In other words, bridging revolutions, Elas, and America. So that's the theme. The other thing that we want to do this year in the parade is we want to honor the Philhellenes of the various nations who aided in the revolution. Um, so there's about 13 nations that were involved. When I say involved, I don't mean the nations themselves per se, but their people were involved. There's about 13 nations in Europe, and also, obviously, you had Haiti was involved as the first nation to support the Hellenic uprising. So we're honoring them also. So we're having actually events where I've invited all the consul generals in New York from these 13 different nations to join us in this particular parade. That has never happened before, ever. So, how am I looking at this parade? I'm looking at this parade, again, not as a parade that's a Greek Independence Day parade only for the Greeks, but as a Greek Independence Day that really symbolizes the importance of this revolution internationally around the world, and as an event that's taking place in America, a Hellenic parade in America, that brings in also Americans, because I look at the Hellenic Revolution as something that relates to American history, but at the same time, it represents and is associated with the history of many nations around the world, whether it's England, whether it's Germany, whether it's Switzerland, whether it's Italy. Of course, there was no Italian nation at that point, but there were different city-states, let's say, that supported the revolution, whether it's Romania, but there was no Romania at that particular time, etc. So that's what we want to do. So we wanted to elevate this particular parade and elevate it across the board. So we've had from last year up until the parade that's going to take place in April 26th, we're going to have basically almost 30 different events, 30 different events. Some of them are events where, for example, we go to the Statue of Liberty with the representatives of the different nations, and we have a ceremony in front of the Statue of Liberty. And many people don't know this, Nico, and to the guests, that there is the highest point in Brooklyn, there's a statue of Athena. And Athena has her arms out, and she's pointing directly at the Statue of Liberty, okay, at the Statue of Liberty. So that boat thing will take those two things into account. 205, 250, Athena saluting Liberty, Lady Liberty. And I'll stop there, Yuko, because there's a lot of things I can talk about. But we've had from last year to the parade, we're going to have approximately 30 different events around this theme. And the events are also intellectual events where we've had presentations. I've had, for example, 6 out of the 8 presentations so far. I made them around the themes that I talked about with specificity. In other words, how the Greek Revolution affected the American abolitionist movement with specificity, not just the brief thing that I'm just mentioning now. The women's suffrage movement, how the revolution affected that, etc. And also the diaspora that many people forget in Elas. They think, oh, okay, people, it's all about Elas. No, it's not all about Elas. Even Kolokotronis himself was in the diaspora. When he was in the Ionian Islands, he was in the diaspora. He wasn't in Elas. Okay. So the diaspora played a very important role also. And I've also spoken about that in detail, about the diaspora and how it affected the revolution. So I'll stop there because, as you say, I can talk for hours.
Well, you actually talked 20 minutes. That's okay, no problem. That's what I said. And you haven't even touched the first base.
No, actually, I could talk about hours about this stuff.
I know you can. And, I think everybody understood your English. There's no problem. But ο κύριος Κάτσος έχει αλλάξει το focus της όλης της διαδικασίας, γιατί παλιά ποτέ δεν σκεφτήκανε το connection, το interaction μεταξύ της Ελληνικής Επανάστασης και της Αμερικανικής ανεξαρτησίας, και είπε σοβαρά πράγματα τα οποία δεν τα συζητάμε στην Ελλάδα και δεν νομίζω τα συζητάνε και στην Αμερική οι Έλληνες της Αμερικής. Και είναι καλό για μας ότι ένας άνθρωπος τα έχει καλύψει αυτά τα πράγματα. Τώρα θα...
Nico, let me mention one more thing.
Sure.
The first battle that Americans fought, the first battle that Americans fought overseas, the Battle of Derna. There were more Hellenic people fighting for America than there were Americans fighting in the Battle of Derna. Okay? So, and it was the first victory overseas of the United States of America.
Αυτό ήταν στην Αφρική, that's in Africa.
That was in Tripoli. You know the Marine song that they say from the Alienists ήταν εκεί in 1805 fighting with the Americans during the Barbary Wars. Δεν το ξέρουμε. Not only that, Nico, not only that, when the people wrote, who were the fathers of the United States of America, when they were writing the Declaration of Independence and all these things, their model was Elas. Their model was the ancient model. Okay, these are important things to remember. There's a complete linkage between the two nations. We're not taking advantages of all these issues because people don't know. They don't understand.
Of course. Yeah. Και αν ακούσεις τον πρώην δήμαρχο της Σπάρτης, τον Πέτρο τον Δούκα, θα πει αυτό που είπε ο Ηλίας και θα πει ότι αυτό που κάνανε στην Αμερική βασίζεται στο σύστημα της Σπάρτης και έχει ολόκληρη θεωρία γι' αυτό, τέλος πάντων. Λοιπόν, θα ζητήσω από εσάς αλφαβητικά ο Βασίλης ο Μαλής πρώτος, κατόπιν ο κύριος Μαλασπίνας, ο κύριος Πασβάκος και τελευταίος ο Δημήτρης ο Σημειονίδης. Δώστε η περιγραφή ποιοι είστε, τι κάνετε και τα λοιπά και τις ερωτήσεις, να κάνουμε μια συζήτηση, εντάξει. Στη γλώσσα που θέλετε να μιλήσετε. Βασίλη.
Ναι. Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Good evening to everyone. I'm going to speak in English so as well to facilitate.
Thank you for that.
And thank you very much and truly for the inspiring lecture. First of all, the introduction that you made. My name is Vasilis Balis. I'm a biologist, bioinformatician, expert, and also a PhD in medicine. And currently, I'm a program leader in clinical biochemistry and basic sciences in Aegean College in Thessaloniki campus. I studied academically in the UK, and I completed there my undergraduate and some of my postgraduate studies, and did my PhD back in Greece and a couple of postdocs here in the Aristotle University. And but I've also been in 6 months in UCLA in the medical school there as well for part of my studies. So that was my first taste of the US. And I also was in a vocational scholarship going around the beautiful state of New York, from Newark to Lima, New York City, up to Niagara Falls and Finger Lakes, and also Athens, the beautiful village of Athens, New York. And currently, I'm honored to be serving as the adjutant of the American Legion for the post here in Greece. And for all these reasons, today's topic resonates with me, not only academically, but also personally, of course. And I would like to be delighted. I would be delighted to make a few questions, if you might. So I would like to go on with the first one. Like, what role do commendations like 20th and 25th anniversaries play in shaping identity for younger generations, which I'm most interested in as I'm in higher education?
You're talking about the in here in the United States.
Yes, yes.
What effect it has on them? Listen, the younger people feel the March 25th or the Greek Hellenic Revolution, I think, a lot more than other people, maybe even in Hellas. Because don't forget, when you're living somewhere, sometimes you don't appreciate, all the things that are historic. But for us who do not live there, we have obviously an association, an affiliation with our past. Don't forget that a lot of the people who are in the United States came from the countryside of Hellas. They came from the countryside. So their linkages to the revolution become personal. They can become regional and they become personal. And this is transmitted also to the younger generation here. So when the young people here see people marching in the streets and the revolution and all that, they're extremely enthused by that. And as a matter of fact, they feel something personal to it because their own relatives fought in the revolution. Something that some people may not associate with what's happening, let's say, in a Greek parade, where for the most part it's a military parade, and it's not a parade, let's say, with children, with grandmothers, with all types of people.
Okay, thank you for that. And what else do you think will be happening in the future for the two nations? Like, looking ahead, how can future generations honor the legacy of both independence movements in a meaningful way? Like, there are, of course, in Greece, many people who join the parades, and we have relatives. We have relatives, both in many words, and we're proud of that. But also, we're trying to get that feeling through to our children. But also, what's the most important lesson from these two revolutions that we can leave to these children, from the American and the Greek Revolution as well?
The biggest issue we have is, and you say, how does it carry on? It has to carry on by us. In other words, we have to discuss it. It's not something that's being discussed. It's not being discussed in the United States of America, and it's not being discussed in Greece. Okay, you don't go to Greece and have people speaking about the linkages between the two nations historically and in a real significant way. Significant, not just linkages that are minor. We're talking about major linkages. So both in the United States and both in Hellas, we have not done the proper job of educating the people. So when you say, how do we transmit that to the children don't know this. In other words, the children don't know this because the parents don't know this. The parents are not transmitting this information. When let's say the American ambassador comes to speak to the Hellenic population, she doesn't. I'm not going to say she, forget about she or he. They don't know their own history of the United States to explain to the Hellenic population how they are actually linked. At the same time, when you have people coming over from Hellas, ambassadors, etc., to the United States, they themselves don't understand the linkages between the two nations. What I'm talking about today is something that most people do not understand, and I think it's missing in both nations, both on a political level, because it's one thing to talk to somebody about, you're from Hellas, a small country. It's another thing to say to somebody, our relatives and your relatives were together in revolutions. We supported each other. We did this, you did that, etc. It's a completely different conversation. a conversation we're not having, and a conversation that I'm bringing up, not because I'm a genius or anything like that, because don't forget, I've done hundreds of these lectures, okay, going back years about the linkages between the two nations. But we have to get this across to the general public. We have to get it across to the public in Elas, and we have to get it across to the public in America. We have to make everyone understand what our linkages are and how important they are historically. And at the same time, the importance internationally of the Hellenic Revolution, internationally, not a revolution of some little country that took place, 205 years ago. This is something that we have to do because we have not done a good job so far.
Βασίλη, άλλες ερωτήσεις μετά. Εγώ θέλω να ρωτήσω τον κύριο Κάτσο, how come a university like Deary College, whatever they call it now, why don't they have a history course that speaks about that, about the connection, the connectivity between the Greek Revolution and the American, and they're American in Greece. Why haven't they thought about that?
Nico, in order to have something like that, you need people that can speak to something like that. Okay.
Okay. Well,
and there's very few. There's very few professors, etc., and things like that nature that even know this type of thing. There are people that do know it. Okay. You have, for example, Professor Konstantin Hatzidimitriou, who's a perfect person that can discuss these particular things. He's written books, etc. But most people don't understand this. Not only that, most people, they talk about the diaspora, people write books about the diaspora from Greece, etc.
Yeah,
they don't understand anything about the diaspora. It's like comical, actually. So the reason why they don't do it is because, number one, no one has discussed it with them. And number two, there has not been any serious dialogue and books written about the linkages between the two nations. It does exist. Everything that I'm talking about, in great detail exists. We just have to get it up.
When you come to Greece, your next visit, maybe you can talk to Mrs. Kardaras. You can have a lecture about that at Debo Center. Talk about that.
I can have, as you know, lectures for hours about different.
I know, but you should do that. Anyway, ο επόμενος είναι ο Χρήστος ο Μαλασπίνας. Στα ελληνικά, ο δημοσιογράφος μας. Εσύ, κύριε Σημειονή, θα είσαι τελευταίος, εντάξει.
Και αλφαβητικά
και ό,τι θέλεις. Χρήστο.
Καλησπέρα σας και από μένα. Εγώ θα μιλήσω ελληνικά και αγγλικά, θα κάνω τα ερωτήματά μου προς τον κύριο Λουκάτσο. Εγώ θα ήθελα να εστιάσω στην παρέλαση καθεαυτή. Πώς πάνε οι προετοιμασίες, πόσοι θα συμμετάσχουν, πού βρίσκονται μέχρι στιγμής τα οικονομικά και να κάνω λοιπόν το πρώτο ερώτημα το οποίο θα αφορά σε μία δήλωση που έκανε ο κύριος Κάτσος πριν από λίγες μέρες που είχαν το επίσημο δείπνο στο Σταθάκιο και όπου είπε ότι 31 είδη τραπέζια στο κεντρικό dinner που θα γίνει μετά την παρέλαση έχουν ήδη κλειστεί και ότι περιμένει να είναι sold out η τελετή. Πώς πάει αυτό, είναι έτσι τα πράγματα, έχουν προχωρήσει? Αυτό παρακαλώ.
I can answer that. And it's not something that I wanted to say in public, but effectively the gala is sold out right now. Okay. So it's we haven't publicly announced it. This is the first discussion where it's coming out. But we're when we talked about raising the stature of this particular parade, we're going to Cipriani 42nd Street, which is a high end place to go. The cheapest table is $6,000. So it goes $6,000, $10,000, $20,000, and $25,000. So we're effectively sold out at the moment. And in terms of the economics are going very well, because I think that was one of the things that you wanted to talk about. The economics are working out. So that's sold out. Now the next thing is to do very well on our journal, okay? Because there's different components, different pockets of, let's say, money. One is obviously the gala. The other one is the journal. And the third one has to do with raffles and things of that nature, and some other events. You know, we've had different events where they raised money. We had radiothons, for example, which raised money, you know, for the parade. So to make a big picture, you know, this type of parade costs about $450,000 to $500,000. Okay, so to answer your question is, we're doing very well right now. That's really the answer to the whole thing.
Good. Mr. Katsos, Paul Makropoulos, the former head of the Lottery Commission, pointed out that so far they have distributed 2,000 almost lottery tickets, and that you expect to receive $40,000. Is that correct?
Well, listen. I love Paul Makropoulos, and I love his enthusiasm. If he does 40,000, it'll be great. It'll be great, quite frankly. But that's one of the components that I mentioned earlier. Don't forget, we still have a lot of time to for the raffles, and 2,000 maybe right now, but there's going to be more than 2,000 obviously raffles that are going to be sold by the time of the parade. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Ναι, Χρήστο, να περιμένουμε και σε άλλες ερωτήσεις μετά. Εγώ να κάνω μια ερώτηση. Last year, they earned $200,000. That was the earnings, the profits.
No, it wasn't 200,000. It was incorrect.
Oh, was it?
No. That was an incorrect statement.
Do you have a target for this year?
No. Let me be quite frank with you, because I think it's important. Okay, we had when we started about $220,000 in the bank. Okay. Now that 220,000 was accumulated over 4 years. Okay. Wow. In other words, in the first year, $50,000 went in. 50,000 went in. By the federation, because they had two sides, so they put in 50,000 into that account. I was basically the co-chair of that parade, and when we had that parade, we added another $50,000 to that, so that was about, let's say, 100,000. And then last year, because you had somebody donate 100,000, to be the let's say the Grand Marshal of the parade, Marinakis. You've heard this story. It's been written about. So when you look at the 220, okay, and you say you had 100, you had another 100. The last 3 parades have made about $10,000 each year for 3 years. So in other words, the stuff that you read about in the papers is just incorrect. They did not raise 220 or 200,000 last year. They raised maybe 10,000, but the Marinakis thing or the thing from Tunis was what contributed to the amount.
So what about this year? What do you think?
Well, this year we're going to make more than last year, quite frankly, and we didn't. And we didn't ask anyone to buy in and become a Grand Marshal. I made it very clear that no one will buy in to be a Grand Marshal. No one. No one's going to buy in to be a Grand Marshal of this parade.
Και ο κύριος Παρασκευάκος τώρα.
Με ακούτε. Κομμάντερ, με ακούτε?
Ναι, σε ακούμε. Και σε βλέπουμε και σε ακούμε.
Χαρά μου μεγάλη που βλέπω τον Λουκάτσο. Μια προσωπικότητα που πραγματικά με έχει συγκινήσει για τις εξαιρετικές δραστηριότητες και τη συνδρομή σε όλο το φάσμα που αφορά την ομογένεια. Θα μιλήσω ελληνικά γιατί πρέπει να τιμήσω κι εγώ από το μετερίζει που βρίσκομαι την ελληνική γλώσσα που πρόσφατα πετύχαμε με στρατηγική, με υπομονή και θέληση η ελληνική γλώσσα να αποκτήσει την Παγκόσμια ημέρα ελληνικής γλώσσας που αναγνωρίστηκε από την UNESCO. Καλό είναι να το αναδεικνύουμε αυτό και στους απόδημους Έλληνες, ότι έγινε κάτι πολύ σημαντικό για τον ελληνισμό που πρέπει να αναδεικνύεται στην κάθε ευκαιρία. Θα ήθελα να ρωτήσω τον αδερφό μας τον Λουκάτσο το εξής. Γίνονται και αλλού τέτοιες δραστηριότητες όπως είναι η 25η Μαρτίου σε άλλα μέρη της Αμερικής? Δεύτερον, ενώ έχει η Ελλάς πάρα πολύ μεγάλη ιστορία, βλέπω ότι εστιάζουμε μόνο στην 25η Μαρτίου. Εκτός αν έχει να μας παραθέσει και κάτι που δεν είναι εις γνώση μας, ότι γίνονται και άλλες δράσεις για την ιστορία της πατρίδος μας. Και τελευταίο, να πω το εξής, ότι εάν θελήσει να δημιουργήσει ένα καινούριο πλαίσιο, να επισκεφτούμε την Αμερική, να μιλήσουμε στους αδελφούς μας, τους απόδημους, τη γλώσσα αυτή, την πηγαία ελληνική, και ίσως να αλλάξουν μερικά πράγματα, να δουν ότι μπορούν να μιλήσουν την ελληνική γλώσσα και κυρίως να γίνουν φορείς της ελληνικής ιστορίας. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so let me talk about the Greek language first, okay? Because I've done panel discussions on the Greek language with various professors and all the rest of that. Obviously, you're saying, okay, you're supporting the Greek language. How come you're not speaking the Hellenic language right now? Because it's obvious. I didn't go to school, a Greek school, that I can speak the appropriate way to be understood in the Hellenic language. That doesn't mean I don't speak the Hellenic language. At the same time, you don't want a situation where somebody says, και τι ελληνικά, τι Έλληνας είναι αυτός που δεν μιλάει τα ελληνικά όπως πρέπει να είναι? Hold on a second. Low power mode. Okay. All right. Συγγνώμη, because I had a low power mode that came up. So that's the reason why I'm speaking in the English language right now, because I'm better understood and I can express myself the way I'd like to, rather than say, τι αμόρφωτος αυτός δεν μιλάει την ελληνική γλώσσα όπως πρέπει να τη μιλήσει. So I don't want to get into that situation. So to answer your question on the language, there has been no support from the Hellenic government overseas to the diaspora in the United States for support of the Hellenic language. At the same time, I have to be quite frank that here in the US, I'm not going to discuss what institutions were involved in supporting the Hellenic language, but they have done a very poor job recently. They do not believe it's important to spend the appropriate money to teach the Hellenic language. Now, what do I think? I think we should create more Hellenic schools here in the United States, and I agree with you that in order to be a true Hellene or to feel like a Hellene or to be part of Hellenismos, you must speak the Hellenic language. But what's interesting is they have here schools where Xeni are going to the schools where they teach Greek and they're actually speaking Greek. So we are doing a very poor job, but at the same time, I have to say, I blame also the Hellenic government for not supporting Hellenic schools, and I blame ourselves. I don't want to discuss institutions because it's going to become like a very aggressive situation. But we know who supported Greek schools in the past, and we know who's not supporting Greek schools properly in the present. In terms of lectures, as everybody knows, I've done hundreds of lectures, not only on the Greek Revolution, but on the Greek genocide, for example. I've done dozens of things on all aspects of Hellenic history. Many people can see some of the events that I've done with professors and all the rest of that on YouTube, on the EMBCA YouTube channel. So obviously these things are extreme importance to me. It's very important for us to also, in particular, let me tell you something else. Many people in the United States who are talking about their causes are speaking in the Hellenic language, okay? Πηγαίνουν εκεί και μιλάνε στα ελληνικά. Και είναι πολλοί μιλάνε ελληνικά και ο άλλος κόσμος δεν καταλαβαίνει τι λένε. In other words, we are speaking to ourselves. The problem that we have is we're not speaking to the other people to explain to them what the issues are, our issues, the Hellenic issues. And if you're in America and you want to discuss with Americans Hellenic issues, you don't use the Hellenic language where they don't understand what you're talking about. And that's a failure, quite frankly, in some of our institutions.
Ρώτησε και κάτι άλλο, Λου. Ρώτησε αν he also asked another thing, that if there are other historic events in Greece that are celebrated in the United States, like 25th of March. Is there something else? Let's say 28th
Well,
of
of
October.
course. The Orchid
All of that.
is a major
Okay. All right.
celebration. Not only that. When we say in the United States, what are we talking about? We're talking about in our communities. Okay.
Right.
Now, Orchid Day is another thing that is also international in scope. Okay.
Right.
Because if it wasn't for Alas, which by the way took the longest time for the other powers, the fascist powers, to take over. Every other country fell in days. Every other country in Europe fell in days. It was Alas. It was Alas that raised the spirit of the Europeans who were under slavery by the Nazis, and it raised the spirit throughout the world that a small nation like Alas can defeat a fascist power. It caused the German forces, forces which were going to Russia, to change their plans, come south, and that affected the war eventually. Again, many people do not discuss the linkages. Many times we want to talk about Orchid Day and what we did, rather than taking the international perspectives. Yes, this is what Hellenic did, but this is how it was important internationally. This word is also not getting out properly.
Okay, Dimitri.
Okay. My name you already know.
Yeah.
So I'm a retired banker, retired university professor in the Aristotelian University of Thessaloniki and Henley the Management College. And the way I met Nick, I cannot even count how many years ago, was through banking, when we were both bankers. But yes, I've had a very nice career in banking. But my love has always been history, international relations, and geopolitical analysis. The thing is, if I may comment on the previous speaker's points, yeah, Mr. Katsos is right. Why do we speak English in English about Alas and about everything that goes with Alas? And I mean, not only historical facts, but principles, values, and what was the example of Greece to the rest of the world, for those that really wanted to see it. I think the language is immaterial. I would remind you of the famous speech of Xenophon Zolotas in the United Nations, a speech given in English using only Greek words. Nobody had a problem about language. Everybody understood. If we, all nations, consider the percentage of Greek words that are in everyday use in any language, or Latin words that came from as an anti-loan from Greek language, the whole universe speaks Greek. And they just don't realize the extent of that. So for me, language that we use is really not that important. It's what is inside us that is important. And Greeks, I'm sorry to say, younger generations of Greeks do not know history, because the Greek educational system insists on giving the basics and not always in a very objective way. So the way Greek history is taught, it's not interesting to younger generation. It's just a subject they have to learn by heart. Very few of the students really understand history. And history you cannot learn from what they teach you in schools anywhere in the world, because every country presents history on the way they think that it would help build a national image, a national motivation, a national self-admiration, so on and so forth. In my view, that's totally wrong. History is history, and it should be synonymous to objectivity. And it isn't in Greece right now. I know it's the same in a lot of the Balkan countries, including Turkey, so on and so forth. Now I'll give you an example. Constantinopolis. Here comes Mohammed and occupies it. And he changes the name to Istanbul. And he thinks it's Turkish.
Istanbul.
Doesn't realize it has been derived from Istinpolin, because every Byzantine didn't use Constantinople, he used Poli. Even today, Greeks from Istanbul, from Constantinople, they say Stimpoli. Istinpolin became Istanbul. And they are proud. They Turkicized the word Constantinopolis. Little that they know. And there are many such cases. I would, with your permission, use a very well-known Turkish improper word. Aysiktir. Everybody, if you ask any Greek, they will tell you that's Turkish, and that's a bad word. Well, it isn't. It's Greek, from ancient Greek. Ai se iktiro. I feel sorry for you forever. So, language is immaterial.
Dimitri, question.
Nico,
Yeah.
I apologize. I just want to mention that I'm very low on power. If you lose me, it's because I lost power. Okay.
Okay.
I will add a couple of things so everyone knows. Okay.
Yeah.
Even the symbol of the Turkish flag, by the way, the star and the crescent, is a Byzantine symbol of Constantinople. Many people don't realize that the star and the crescent is from Byzantium. That's where it comes from. Also, in talking about the myths, etc., everybody talks about Germanos raised the flag on March 25th, etc. That never happened historically. Everybody knows that. Okay, Krifas Skolia and all the rest of that really didn't happen. We talk about the three people that were in the Filikia Teria, but everybody knows historically that when the Greek Revolution broke out, that there was only one person in the Filikia Teria, and that was Sekeris, Panayotis Sekeris. Not those three guys, those original people. No one knows, people don't discuss that part of the reason why the revolution started when it started, okay, was because the commander, who was the governor of the Moria, went and took over the forces of the Sultan against Ali Pasha, and that was the perfect opportunity to come into the Moria. Nobody discusses that there were constant rebellions from 1453, constant. It wasn't one rebellion, there were constant rebellions. But that one was successful for many reasons, including people who came from the diaspora, who in many cases were mercenaries for foreign nations. They fought in every foreign nation war. Whether it was Napoleonic wars, they fought in them. whether it was the wars of the two Sicilies, they fought in them. There's a lot of things that are not taught properly. I agree with him. But again, if you lose me, it's because of power.
Okay, I won't lose you. Δημήτρη, έχεις κάποια ερώτηση να κάνεις για να
Yes,
συνεχίσουμε
I would
και
like
οι άλλοι?
to know. Well, we all know of the parade in New York, and we all know about the reception in the White House. I don't know if this reception in the White House is done for every Independence Day of every nation that's represented in the United States, or it's just done for Greece.
No, it's done for two nations. One is Ireland and the other is Greece.
Oh yeah,
and it started a few years ago. It started when Yakovos was the archbishop, and it's become sort of like a tradition. And also, there's linkages. You know, now you have Trump. You know, you have Katsamatidis, who's a friend of Trump, etc. So you know, these things happen, and
Well,
it's not
okay.
linked. It's not linked to the parade. This is not linked to the parade at all.
But
it's a completely separate thing.
Still, it is a recognition.
Yes.
Of the linkage that you were speaking about, to which I fully agree about this linkage, and it did not ever stop with the War of Independence.
Yeah, the problem. Let me say one thing. Let me add one thing. When they go to the White House, everything that we're talking about right now is not discussed. Okay, it's not discussed because the people who are there on both sides don't know the linkages. Okay, everybody goes there because they're going to the White House, etc. Everybody's saying good things, but everything we talked about is not discussed. They don't know these things.
Well, it isn't discussed. It isn't discussed.
But τον κύριο Κάτσο.
I don't know if he can switch the power on.
Δεν ξέρω αν μας ακούει. Μας ακούς?
He can always see the rest from YouTube.
Anyway, I'm surprised. Lou, μας ακούς? Can you hear us?
Όχι, είναι out.
Είναι τελείως out. Λοιπόν, εγώ ήθελα να ζητήσω τον Χρήστο να μιλήσει για την ελληνική γλώσσα, έτσι, που είδες, είπε ο Κάτσος, κάτι τηλέφωνο, ο Κάτσος τώρα. Ναι, Λου, yes. So you can continue. Well, okay, you know, εντάξει. Λοιπόν, that's okay. Don't worry. Thank you for your contribution. Right? Next time you have more power. Όταν πάρεις. Εντάξει. Άντε, να είσαι καλά. Γεια σου. Έχασε power και του είπα, το ακούσατε την επόμενη φορά, να έχεις περισσότερη δύναμη για να... εντάξει, είπε ορισμένα πράγματα εκεί πέρα, τα οποία αυτά που έχει πει για τους μαύρους, η σύνδεση του μαύρου, το abolition που είπε και δεν τα λένε άλλοι, τα είπε ο Λου το έχει πει αυτά. Τώρα, εγώ δεν είμαι ιστορικός και δεν μπορώ να τα συζητήσω αυτά, αλλά μάλιστα αυτό που είπε για την γλώσσα, Χρήστο, για τα ελληνικά.
Τα ελληνικά χαθήκαμε, μπερδευτήκαμε.
Ναι, τα είπε, όχι, τα είπε.
Εγώ θέλω να επανέλθω στην ουσία, δεν είναι ώρα τώρα για να λύσουμε το γλωσσικό.
Ναι.
Η ελληνική γλώσσα είναι αυτή που είναι, έχει την αξία που έχει, είμαστε Έλληνες, είμαστε περήφανοι για τη γλώσσα μας και είναι και περήφανοι πολλοί Ευρωπαίοι και πολλοί Αμερικανοί επίσης για το ελληνικό πνεύμα, άρα και για την ελληνική γλώσσα. Και θα πω λοιπόν στα ελληνικά ότι ο εορτασμός της Εθνικής Επετείου της Επανάστασης του 1921 είναι μία μοναδική ευκαιρία για τους απόδημους Έλληνες να κρατούν ζωντανή τη φλόγα της ιστορικής μνήμης που ενώνει όλους τους Έλληνες όπου και αν ζουν, στα πέρατα της οικουμένης, όποια γλώσσα και αν μιλούν. Και έτσι με την παρέλαση στην 5η Λεωφόρο, όπου είμαστε η μία από τις δύο εθνότητες που μπορούμε να κάνουμε παρέλαση στην 5η Λεωφόρο, εμείς και οι Άιρις, πρέπει να στέλνει μηνύματα ενότητας και αγώνα για την ελευθερία και τη δικαιοσύνη και όχι φυσικά να έχουμε θέμα αν θα μιλάμε ελληνικά ή αν θα μιλάμε αγγλικά. Μιλάμε ελληνικά γιατί είμαστε Έλληνες, μαθαίνουμε αγγλικά γιατί είμαστε και πολιτισμένοι άνθρωποι και μιλάμε και τις δύο γλώσσες και όλα να πάνε καλά με την παρέλαση. Αυτό έχει σημασία, γιατί προσέξτε, και το λέω με τα λόγου γνώσεως, εάν κάτι δεν πάει καλά στην παρέλαση την ελληνική στην 5η Λεωφόρο, την επόμενη χρονιά δεν θα είμαστε εμείς στην 5η Λεωφόρο, διότι είναι τόσες πολλές οι εθνότητες που διεκδικούν παρέλαση στην 5η Λεωφόρο, που περιμένουν ένα στραβοπάτημα δικό μας. Γι' αυτό και είναι, κατά την άποψή μου, σημαντικό ότι μπορέσανε, παρά τα χάλια που έχει δυστυχώς η Ομοσπονδία Ελληνικών Σωματείων Νέας Υόρκης, με το που έκαναν μια ειδική επιτροπή να χειριστεί τα της παρελάσεως, αυτό ήταν μια πολύ σημαντική πρωτοβουλία που προήλθε από τον Αρχιεπίσκοπο Αμερικής, γιατί έτσι μπορούμε σήμερα ακόμη να έχουμε την παρέλασή μας και να παρελάβουμε με τους εύζωνες εκεί και να μας παρακολουθεί όλη η Αμερική. Αυτό είχα να πω.
Ποιος πηγαίνει στην παρέλαση από το κράτος, ποιος υπουργός πηγαίνει, έχεις ακούσει κάτι?
Έχει πάει εις μεν τη Βοστόνη.
Καλά,
είναι ο αντιπρόεδρος ο Κωστής Χατζηδάκης στη Βοστόνη. Στη Νέα Υόρκη ξέρω θα είναι ο πρόεδρος της Διακομματικής Επιτροπής της Βουλής, ο κύριος Φόρτομας, Φίλιππος Φόρτομας, μαζί με αντιπροσώπους από τα κόμματα, και αυτή θα είναι.
Δεν θα είναι δηλαδή ο υφυπουργός αρμόδιος για τον απόδημο ελληνισμό?
Θα είναι ο Φόρτομας, αυτός είναι.
Όχι, δεν είναι ο Φόρτομας, ο υφυπουργός είναι
συγγνώμη, όχι. Ο Λοβέρδος είναι. Ο Λοβέρδος θα είναι και αυτός εκεί.
Ο Λοβέρδος θα είναι και αυτός εκεί, ναι. Και θα πάνε και τσολιάδες, έτσι.
Θα πάνε και οι εύζωνοι, οι οποίοι επίσης θα παραστούν και στην παρέλαση της Βοστόνης.
Ωραία.
Και
να ολοκληρώσω, γιατί δεν είχα ολοκληρώσει, Νίκο.
Τι δεν είχες ολοκληρώσει? Μας έκανε μια διάλεξη για ελληνική γλώσσα, για να μιλήσει και ο Βασίλης.
Συγγνώμη, αλλά όταν μιλάμε για linkages, για σύνδεσμο μεταξύ Ελλάδος και Αμερικής, η Ντέρνα ιστορικά ήταν μόνο η αρχή. Ακολούθησε και ο πρώτος παγκόσμιος, μακεδονικό μέτωπο, ακολούθησε ο δεύτερος παγκόσμιος, ακολούθησε ο συμμοριτοπόλεμος, δεν θέλω να τον αποκαλέσω εμφύλιο. Σύμφωνα με τον νόμο και τις αποφάσεις του ΟΗΕ είναι συμμοριτοπόλεμος. Λοιπόν, διότι από την πρώτη στιγμή ήταν εδώ η αμερικάνικη αποστολή και πολλοί Έλληνο-Αμερικάνοι αλλά και Αμερικάνοι στρατιωτικοί σκοτώθηκαν.
Μην μπλέξουμε στον εμφύλιο.
Δεν με ενδιαφέρει να είμαι πολιτικά politically correct.
Εμένα
με ενδιαφέρει να είμαι historically correct.
Δημήτρη, άκουσα με. Δεν μπορώ, κανόνες της Λεγιώνας, δεν μπορώ να το πιάσω αυτό το θέμα.
Ωραία,
είναι καλό θέμα. Εγώ μπορώ να συμφωνώ μαζί σου, αλλά δεν μπορώ να το πω.
Το θέμα μου δεν είναι στην ιστορία. Η ιστορία είναι μία και είναι objective. δεν σημαίνει
εντάξει,
συμφωνώ,
εντάξει.
διαφωνώ και σε αυτά που συμφωνώ τα προωθώ και αυτά που δεν συμφωνώ τα θάβω.
Πολλοί δεν συμφωνούν μαζί σου. Λένε ότι οι
Δεν
νικητές
θέλω να
γράφουν την
συμφωνήσουν μαζί
ιστορία.
μου.
Εντάξει,
Η ιστορία είναι
ναι.
ανεξάρτητη από μένα, από σένα, από
Εντάξει,
οποιονδήποτε.
εντάξει,
Είναι αυτή
εντάξει.
που είναι. Δεν αλλάζει.
Ναι, ναι, ναι.
Ποτέ δεν έχω μιλήσει για ιστορία χωρίς στοιχεία και αποδείξεις.
Αλλάζουν το interpretation. Πώς θα λες στα ελληνικά το interpretation? Αλλάζει... Πώς το είπες, Βασίλη?
Μετάφραση.
Ή μετά, ναι, περάζει γι' αυτό. Τέλος πάντων.
Τέλος πάντων, το θέμα μας είναι ότι το linkage ήταν μόνιμο, διαρκές και συνεχίζεται. Και εύχομαι να συνεχίζεται πάντα. Η παρέλαση βοηθάει στο awareness και της τρίτης, τέταρτης γενιάς των Ελλήνων εκεί, εξυψώνει, αλλά βοηθάει και τους Έλληνες που δεν ξέρουν ότι είμαστε οι μόνες δύο χώρες που έχουν parade. Το St. Patrick's Day και η παρέλαση 25ης Μαρτίου. Από τις τόσες εθνότητες που υπάρχουν στην Αμερική. Και αυτό πρέπει να μας κάνει να νιώθουμε και υπερήφανοι. Το τι όμως μαθαίνουμε εδώ και το τι προβάλλεται με το τι είναι η πραγματικότητα δεν είναι πάντοτε το ίδιο και το ξέρουμε όλοι. Τώρα αν δεν βλέπεις και εσύ ο ίδιος, λες αυτό δεν είναι politically correct. Η ιστορία δεν ξέρει από political correctness.
Εγώ, άκουσε Δημήτρη, εγώ θέλω να stick to the... Απόψε, απόψε μιλάμε, το είπες, εντάξει,
Θυμάσαι όταν είχαμε το webinar για τον Μεταξά.
Ναι, εντάξει, ναι, το είχαμε.
Το θέμα είναι ότι δεν μπορούμε να μεταφράζουμε την ιστορία κατά το δοκούν.
Όχι, εντάξει, συμφωνώ. Λοιπόν, να ζητήσω και από τον Βασίλεια, θέλει να πει κάτι για να το κλείσουμε σε λίγο.
Ναι, εξαιρετικά, φυσικά, εννοείται. Απλά έτσι μια επισήμανση ότι η εμφύλιος είναι ο πόλος μεταξύ μελών του ίδιου λαού έθνους, έτσι. Από εκεί και πέρα, οποιαδήποτε άλλη ερμηνεία για μένα ακριβώς και εμένα, ιστορικά δεν ευσταθεί. Έτσι. Αντίστοιχα, σαν Έλληνας που έχω ζήσει στο εξωτερικό αρκετά χρόνια, ήμουν περήφανος όταν άκουγα τους καθηγητές μου στην Οξφόρδη και λέγανε έχουμε κάποιον Έλληνα εδώ, ας πούμε, όταν μιλούσαμε για τα διάφορα είδη, στη ζωολογία ή τα φυτά κτλ. Όπου οι περισσότερες λέξεις στην επιστήμη είναι ελληνικές, όντως, έτσι. Αλλά όπως επίσης έμαθα και στον καιρό που ήμουν στο LA πάλι εκεί πέρα στην ιατρική αντίστοιχα, είδα μικρά έθνη και πολύ πιο πρόσφατα από το δικό μας έθνος να συλλέγουν χρήματα για τον επαναπατρισμό των ομοεθνών τους σε μέρη τα οποία ένα μικρό έθνος στη Μέση Ανατολή εξαπλώνεται και κάνει πολλά πράγματα αυτή τη στιγμή υπέρ του μεγέθους τους που δεν θα το περίμενε κανείς. Καλές οι παρελάσεις, εξαιρετικές παρελάσεις, εξαιρετικές, έτσι πρέπει να γίνονται, πρέπει να θυμούνται όλοι και εντός και εκτός στην ιστορία μας, γιατί χωρίς να θυμόμαστε πραγματικά την ιστορία μας ξεχνάμε ποιοι είμαστε και είναι λάθος αυτό. Αλλά αντίστοιχα καλό είναι και να βλέπουμε και έναν τρόπο αυτό που συμβαίνει και που χάνεται ουσιαστικά σε προηγμένες γενιές, που θέλω να ρωτήσω λίγο για τον κύριο Γκάτσο που το ανέφερε πριν. Η γλώσσα που είναι πολύ σημαντική, η υποστήριξη που υπάρχει στα σχολεία του εξωτερικού και όχι μόνο στην Αμερική και σε άλλες χώρες. Έτσι. Όλα αυτά πρέπει να εκλογικευτούν και να πάψουν να είναι υπέρ απλά κάποιων μικρών κινήσεων υπέρ επιβίωσης ή όχι θεσμών ή άλλων τέλος πάντων πραγμάτων, τα οποία δεν βοηθούν τον ελληνισμό. Κινήσεις όπως του κυρίου Γκάτσου, αυτές οι ενωτικές κινήσεις, οι υπερκομματικές κτλ. Είναι πράγματα τα οποία πρέπει να γίνονται και γίνονται από άλλα έθνη, τα οποία είναι έθνη και το δείχνουν σε όλο τον πλανήτη. Έτσι. Αυτό είναι εξαιρετικό που συμβαίνει, οπότε αυτά. Έτσι και από μένα σαν closing remarks. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Γιάννη, τι θες, Παρασκευάκος?
Είναι πολύ συγκινητικό, δεν θα το κρύψω, ότι οι Έλληνες εδώ είχαν κοινή πορεία στη σκέψη μαζί μου και δεν κάνανε πίσω στην έννοια ότι η γλώσσα και η ιστορία των Ελλήνων δεν πρέπει να παρακάμπτεται για κανένα λόγο. Γιατί όπως προανέφεραν, βέβαια όχι ευθαρσώς έτσι όπως και πρέπει, υπάρχει πράγματι ένα κράτος που κάνει πολύ καλά τη δουλειά του, αλλά και εμείς με την ιστορία που έχουμε των χιλιάδων ετών, που η γλωσσομάθεια, η λογική και όπως λέμε άνθρωπος, που είναι η λέξη παγκόσμια, που λέει anthropology, όλα αυτά που λέγεται κόσμος. Όχι, δεν μπορούμε να τα παρακάμψουμε όλα αυτά για μικροσυμφέροντα που πιθανόν να υπάρχουν σε διάφορες καταστάσεις. Να ευχαριστήσω όλους τους παριστάμενους και να αναφέρω και συγγνώμη και όλα που εσείς μου δώσατε το λόγο και δεν ανέφερα ποιος είμαι.
Βέβαια.
Είμαι ο Γιάννης Παρασκευάκος, ναι, εκπρόσωπος του Εμπορικού και Βιομηχανικού Επιμελητηρίου σε όλα τα φόρα, σε πρεσβείες και σε οτιδήποτε το αφορά, σε 2 Ινστιτούτα Στρατηγικών Μελετών Ελλάδος. Είμαι στην Αμερικανική Λεγιώνα μέλος της και φυσικά κάνουμε δράσεις οι οποίες αφορούν την πατρίδα μας και την οικονομία μας. Και στο τέλος, ως επιχειρηματίες. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ που με ακούσατε.
Χρήστο,
Παρακαλώ.
θέλει να πεις κάτι άλλο, άμα θέλεις.
Τα είπατε όλα.
Όχι εσύ.
Τα παραείπαμε όλα.
Είναι
Θέλω...
ναι, λέγε.
Όχι, τίποτε. Περιμένω να ακούσω.
Όχι, ήθελα να πω ότι αυτός που δεν είναι ικανοποιημένος απόψε είναι ο Δημήτρης. Εμείς δεν διαφωνούμε με σένα, απλώς τα βλέπουμε λίγο διαφορετικά. Συμφωνούμε. Όπως έλεγε ένα αστείος μου, και εσύ έχεις δίκιο, και εσύ έχεις δίκιο, και εσύ έχεις δίκιο. Όλοι έχουμε δίκιο. Το θέμα είναι ότι και εγώ έχω ζήσει πολλά χρόνια στην Αμερική και τα λοιπά. Την ελληνική γλώσσα, όπως είπε και ο Κάσος, δυστυχώς δεν διδάσκεται πια. Δεν διδάσκεται. Είναι κάποιοι θεσμοί στην Αμερική που δεν ενδιαφέρονται για την ελληνική γλώσσα. Δεν ήθελε να πει και ούτε θέλω να πω κι εγώ ποιοι είναι αυτοί οι θεσμοί. Εσείς τα ξέρετε. Ούτε θα τους πούμε αυτό, δεν θα θίξουμε κανέναν. Μένα μου έκανε εντύπωση προχτές, παρακολούθησα το Hellenic American Chamber of Commerce της Νέας Υόρκης. Είχε ένα πρόγραμμα για πτυχία στην Ελλάδα στα αγγλικά. Ήταν 15 ελληνικά πανεπιστήμια και μιλούσαν για τα προγράμματα που έχουν για φοιτητές να σπουδάσουν στην Ελλάδα με τη γλώσσα των μαθημάτων αγγλικά. Και εγώ πήγα 2 από αυτά τα πανεπιστήμια και τους είπα, έχετε σκεφτεί όταν εγώ πήγα στην Αμερική, συγγνώμη, πήγα στο Κολομπία, τα αγγλικά μου δεν ήταν καλά, εντάξει, δεν ήταν καθόλου καλά. Και το κατάλαβα μέσα στο Κολομπία και όλο το καλοκαίρι με στείλανε σε ένα σχολείο στο πανεπιστήμιο να μάθω αγγλικά αρκετά καλά για να πάρω τα μαθήματα. Το είπα το ίδιο πράγμα στα 2 πανεπιστήμια, κρατικά. Λέω, έχετε σκεφτεί ποτέ να κάνετε ένα πρόγραμμα για το καλοκαίρι που δίνετε δωρεάν στο φοιτητή? Εγώ δεν πλήρωσα τίποτα για αυτό στο Κολομπία και να μάθει ελληνικά, να το ετοιμάστε. Όχι, λέει, εμείς θέλουμε να έρχονται στην Ελλάδα με τα αγγλικά, με τη γλώσσα τους και το κάνουμε, λέει, και σε γαλλικά. Εντάξει, την ελληνική γλώσσα την ξεχνάνε. Τι να πω, και είναι κρατικά πανεπιστήμια. Μερικά στη Θεσσαλονίκη, πάρα πολλά στη Θεσσαλονίκη, και το πιο ενδιαφέρον πρόγραμμα ήταν αυτό που το Πανεπιστήμιο Αιγαίου. Πολύ προχωρημένο πανεπιστήμιο αυτό. Θα έχουν ένα degree, ένα master's BS degree, πώς το λένε, για 4 χρόνια και θα συνδυάζει φιλοσοφία, ψυχολογία, αρχαιολογία και ιστορία. Και όλα αυτά θα είναι στα αγγλικά. Εντάξει, αυτά. Λοιπόν, η
Θα μείνουν
επόμενη...
4 χρόνια οι φοιτητές εδώ, θα
Ναι,
μάθουν μια χαρά ελληνικά.
Στη Ρόδο θα γίνει αυτό, στη Ρόδο, ναι, αυτό είναι. Ναι, αλλά αυτά δεν τα λένε.
Θα τα μάθουν τα ελληνικά εκτός πανεπιστημίου στα 4 χρόνια.
Αυτό,
Μια
έτσι τα
χαρά.
μαθαίνεις,
Αλλά
έτσι τα μαθαίνεις, ναι. Λοιπόν, οι επόμενοι, για αυτούς που μας ακούνε, που μας βλέπουν, η επόμενη activity της Λεγιώνας είναι στις 6 Απριλίου και το θέμα είναι GDPR, το GDPR. Στη Λεγιώνα, η Λεγιώνα είχε κάποια προβλήματα με το GDPR. Η Ευρώπη το παίρνει πολύ σοβαρά τώρα. Επίσης και στην Ελλάδα. Έχω μάθει ότι η Ελλάδα έχει πληρώσει πολλά πρόστιμα για το GDPR, παραβίαση του GDPR. Και έχω έναν ειδικό που θα μιλήσει γι' αυτό. Στις 8 η ώρα το βράδυ θα βγάλουμε ανακοίνωση. Μετά θα μιλήσει η Υπουργός Εργασίας και Κοινωνικής Ασφάλισης, η κυρία Ευσταθίου. Θα μιλήσει στις 22 Απριλίου. Στις 27 Απριλίου έχουμε άλλο ένα διαδικτυακό για την Ανταρκτική, το Νότιο Πόλο. Ήδη έχουμε καλύψει το Βόρειο Πόλο, θα καλύψουμε και το Νότιο Πόλο. Και 5 Μαΐου έχουμε το θέμα Ινδία, για την Ινδία. Τι γίνεται τώρα με τις εξελίξεις στη Μέση Ανατολή κτλ. Αυτά είναι τα προγράμματα. Σας ευχαριστώ εσάς βέβαια που ήσασταν μαζί μας απόψε, που είχατε πάρα και εμένα στο πρόγραμμα και δεν βγείτε εκτός. Και ευχαριστώ τους θεατές, αυτούς που είδαν το πρόγραμμα απόψε στο YouTube και στο LinkedIn. Να έχετε καλό βράδυ, καλή εβδομάδα, καλό Πάσχα, εάν δεν τα πούμε. Και υγεία πάνω απ' όλα. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Καλό σας βράδυ, να είστε καλά.
Καλό βράδυ.
Καλό βράδυ.
Γεια σας, γεια σας. Καλό βράδυ.